move on then. I won't actually start any questions, but I can get the title out of the way. The disposal of land adjacent to the Old Harlow Medical Centre, which you will find on pages 88 to 91. And again, I think...
I'll be moving it, Chair.
I'm happy to second, but I've got a couple of questions, Chair. Okay?
Yep.
Happy with that?
Thank you, Chair. Same again, most of it's contained within the report, but we was approached by the Health Centre and CCG that about a very small piece of land that they would be interested in purchasing to actually deliver a better service to the residents of Old Harlow, and we're quite happy to facilitate that.
Sounds very straightforward.
Thank you, Chair. I've got three questions, if I may. Can you give me some assurance, whilst I completely welcome this initiative, can you assure me what the implications, if there are any, in relation to the current NHS funding that's actually allowing the practice to go forward and develop this? I'm worried about the timescales. So that's question one. Do you want me to do the other two as well?
I'll do one at a time, if that matters.
Oh, okay.
Makes it easy. Do one. So the timescales we envisage, obviously within here we've got I think it's 8 months within it'll be done. But actually we envisage it's going to be a lot faster process than that. But the 8 months is well within the envelope of the time that they've got to spend the money. So it's well within, well.
Okay, I hope so. In relation to the second question, I'm a little bit concerned that whilst we're selling off council land and this is going to be bought for health provision, as we know in Potter Street, the health service can sometimes change their minds. And what assurances will we put in place that actually if there is any change in health provision, we can protect that land and bring it back to the council?
All of that will be covered within the agreements, the legal agreements, that we not only will it have to be used for the purpose that it's intended for. So there has been an assessment of it, and the current parking arrangements are actually, there's more parking than what they actually need most of the time, but there is an agreement in place to use the parking across the other side of the road. So there should be plenty of overspill parking for any staff and anybody visiting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Garnett.
I've got a question and comment, if you Chair. I was approached about. Shall I talk to the question first?
Yeah.
Well, the question first. Councillor mentioned it, the 8 months, and I find that rather a lengthy period, because I think there is some urgency to get this new build up and running, because they're going to build 4 consultation rooms there, and with the pressure from Newhall and Gildon Park, they need it as quickly as possible. It's already been about 3 months in negotiation since I first brought it to the attention of the council. Is there any way of pushing that through?
I'm very grateful for that question. We recognise 8 months looks like a long time, and we appreciate the urgency.
You're right, it is an urgent build, and it needs to be rolled out faster, but we only work to the time scales that they envisage at maximum, but all parties envisage it's going to be a lot faster than that, a lot faster.
Okay.
It's just the time scales that they've got in maximum time scales.
Can I come back, Jen?
Can I have the questions first? Is this another question? Or is it
no, it's really I wanted to explain the situation.
You will in a second.
I will in a second. Okay, all right.
You want to comment?
Okay.
I've got a question.
So let's do a question.
Yeah, so just on part 6 on page 89, around the 8 months transaction period, what would be helpful to the ward councillors is if we could just be made aware of where the timescales actually finally land as the work continues on this. Clearly, because we're ward councillors, we want to be cited on something that is very important in terms of increasing primary care capacity in Jenner House.
Councillor Charles, that's a perfectly reasonable request and we will meet it. Any other comments?
We've got comments.
Questions? Right, comments.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as I said, I was approached by Dr. Anthony 2 or 3 months ago about this. They were desperate to expand on this site. They didn't want to be forced into going to Gildon Park, which they couldn't afford anyway. The CCG couldn't afford it, so they asked me to take this forward, and I spoke to Brian, and he took the cudgels up from there. I've had various conversations since then as to how it's going, and it's obviously they want to get this up and running. As you said in your opening, it is a very small site. It's just a patch of concrete, which has probably it takes about 6 cars in there, which are the nurses generally are only visiting doctors because they've got their own car park as well. But it is, you know, and I said to Dr. Anthony, we don't want them to move to Gildon Park because most of the residents in Old, so I shouldn't say this, but are fairly elderly, and to try and make their way from Old Harlow up to Gildon Park is not easy. So I'll ask you to perhaps in negotiations, I'm not financially, but if you bear in mind, it is just a patch of concrete, and it's useless to anybody, and this is probably the best thing they can do with it is put a small little building extension. But I wouldn't like you to see that, you know, you think it's the golden egg, because it's CCG, whatever they pay us has got to come out of the CCG's budget. So if you can bear that in mind in negotiations. Thank you.
Yeah, can I first of all welcome the fact that this initial discussion that was kicked off between Dr. Anthony and Councillor Garnett, then subsequently with Brian, to tee up the conversation with Harlow Council, has progressed to this report tonight. We have an ageing population in Old Harlow, and it is very important that we increase the capacity of GP provision at Jenner House. The facility of having 4 additional consultation rooms will not only help the existing population, but the future growth plans that are set out by the council. Whether you agree with them or not, it is important to make sure that the capacity is there to make sure that our ageing population in Old Harlow is looked after and the wider health needs. I am concerned about the timescales, and I am grateful for the fact that the council will, in a timely fashion, provide us with the accurate timescales. The only other point I would make, and I do see where Councillor Durkin is coming from on this, but I think that this land should be handed over to Jenner House without restrictions, because we need to make sure that that land then becomes a fundamental part of Jenner House and can be used for health and well-being in the Old Harlow area. And I think that's really important. I can understand where Councillor Durkin is coming from on this, but you wouldn't blame me as the Old Harlow Ward Councillor to be championing the fact that we have a fantastic practice manager at Jenner House and GPs, and of course the work of the West Essex CCG in moving this forward is positive. It hasn't been positive in other parts of the town, and I recognise that. But this is a good news story for Old Harlow, and I thank my colleague Councillor Garnett, who's teed up this conversation with the council, and the ongoing work that will progress as a result.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Now, I think my understanding of what Councillor Strachan said, he made it very clear that this land will be made available to Jenner House as long as it remains a health centre. So it's perfectly protected as long as it remains a health centre. But unfortunately, the reality that we've seen in Old Harlow House, for example, is that GP surgeries are operating as quasi-private businesses, and so if something were to happen, we wouldn't want to lose that land. And I think that's perfectly reasonable, because something would have to happen first. Whilst it's a health centre, whilst it's a surgery, that land will remain as part of it. And thank you for recognising that whilst this is good news for Old Harlow, much of the rest of Harlow doesn't have that good news. In fact, it's very bad news. Old Harlow House was bad news for the residents around it, many of whom, Councillor Garnett, are elderly and don't need to travel as they now have to other doctors' surgeries. It's increased the pressure on the Hamilton surgery, which is my own surgery, where on 4 occasions I've tried to get a doctor's appointment and There are none available within the 2-week period that they'll go to. And I believe the same is true for Keats House surgery, which is facing the same crisis of demand and lack of supply. So good news for Jenna, but let's not, and let's celebrate that, but let's not ignore the crisis across the rest of Harlow.
Make a comment on that, if you like. Thank you. Perhaps they ought to have a word with Dr. Anthony and see how they managed to make it so efficient.
Yeah, I'm sure we appreciate
Councillor.
I don't want to get into the debate about what is happening in primary care. The point that I was making is that whilst we're agreeing something today, we've got to think about what happens in 30 years' time. And actually, if we think about the people they weren't sitting in this chamber when Potter Street was designed, I don't think anybody at that time envisaged that we would be losing something. So all I'm trying to suggest is that it does give us a point of protection for a legacy just in case. And finally, primary care is moving in a very different direction. So whereas at the moment we have GP surgeries in different areas, if you actually look at the health economy and where we're going, and if you look at what is happening at Lister House, that may well be a model that we will all have to face sometime in the future. So all I was suggesting is actually a legacy to protect our position when most of us will no longer be around.
You'll still be around.
But you'll still be here.
Lucky you. I don't think we need to debate this anymore. Are we happy to accept recommendation A?
Agreed.
Oh, sorry, are we happy to accept recommendations A, B and C?
Agreed.
Thank you.